All right, it's time for Yogi and the BeachMan. Hi, I'm Jim the Yogi.
And I'm Rick Beach, the BeachMan.
We're two Michigan transplants now living in Southwest Florida.
In fact, we're cousins born in 1964, just a month apart.
I like to meditate.
And I like to play bass in a band.
I'm into chanting Om.
And I'm into throwing down some classic rock.
But together, we're on a mission
to promote people that are helping other people.
We want to make the world a better place.
One conversation at a time.
So sit back,
turn up the volume,
and get ready to laugh.
Because we like to have fun
while we spread the love.
Interviewing lovely people, yes, we have fun.
Welcome back to Yogi and the BeachMan. Today we have Laura Giles with us. Laura is a licensed clinical social worker, and she's helping people with paranormal PTSD. Welcome to the show, Laura.
Thanks. I appreciate being here.
We appreciate you being here. And for our guests, this is obviously a little different setup because the BeachMan isn't feeling well, so he's zooming in with us from his house. So welcome.
I don't want to share the funk with the Yogi.
And I don't want the funk.
Yeah, you're going out of town here in a couple of days.
Yeah, I'm leaving for Belize, and I don't want to bring any of that with me. So Laura, where are you coming to us from?
I'm in Virginia.
Where in Virginia?
Central, so Richmond area.
Oh, okay. All right. I've only ever been to the coast, and
yeah, it's nice there.
Yeah, really beautiful area. Yeah. So what is it that you do exactly working with people with paranormal PTSD?
Well, I've spent my career working in trauma, so all aspects of trauma. It could be religious trauma, syndrome, narcissistic abuse, but paranormal PTSD has definitely always been a part of that. And it's kind of blossoming more recently, which is why I started the podcast about it, is just kind of let people know that this is a thing, because it's not unusual for me to be working with a client for a year before it even comes out. And I'm like, okay, why are we keeping this a secret? I think people need to talk about it because it's real.
Tell me more. What is, or tell us more. What is paranormal PTSD?
Well, it could be anything that we don't have a lot of knowledge about. So it's PTSD stemming from an unknown event. So it could just be dreams that are plaguing you. It could be that you think that there are demons after you. It could be that you feel that you are a contactee from ETs. So it could be really any of those kinds of things.
Okay.
Yeah. And we may not even know really what it is. It's just this strange thing that keeps happening to me, and it scares me to death.
Like a strange energy or...
It could be, yeah. Because sometimes we don't even know. I mean, it just could be, I'm waking up for no reason and I'm terrified. I feel like something's happened. I don't know what it is. Because a lot of times there's no memory of it, or it's just kind of fuzzy. But these things happen, and sometimes they leave physical traces that they've happened, like a person might have marks on their body. So it's not, I know a lot of times people think, well, this is all in your head, nothing's going on, you're just crazy, go see a therapist. And that's why they just come and see me, because from the very beginning, I've always taken these things seriously. I don't know what's going on, and you're the best person to talk about your experience. So I'm going to start there. Now, maybe it is delusional, but the times that it's that somebody's having hallucinations or something like that, it's very, very small. I would say less than 5% of the time.
Okay, so 95% of these people are having real paranormal PTSD.
So that's not like an official statistic, but yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay. What's the most bizarre thing you've encountered?
It's hard to answer that question, because the way that I was brought up, the paranormal phenomenon is just part of life. So when people talk to me about stuff that's not mainstream, it's always been just kind of like, okay, to me. Or if somebody asks me, well, tell me about your paranormal experiences, then I have a hard time coming up with it, because it's just kind of normal. But then when people get on a roll saying, well, this happened to me and this happened to me, and I'm like, oh yeah, me too. So I don't know, the weirdest thing, the strangest thing, the most bizarre. I got one.
Okay.
So I had a woman come to me, have no idea how she found me, and she was really vague about what she wanted. And I was having a real hard time understanding, okay, why are you talking to me? How can I help you? And it turned out that she was possessed. and she was really possessed. At that point, I wasn't even sure if I believed in such a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely said, without knowing what's going on, I don't know if I can help you. I'm not an exorcist, and I didn't know what was going on, but I asked her to come in, and I had some friends come over and to help because I just didn't really know what I was dealing with. Is this a mental health issue? What is this? Is this paranormal PTSD? And I stepped outside for a second, and while I was gone, I don't even know what you could call it, but she kind of morphed into something else and freaked everybody out. And I kind of came in midway in this, and she's a little tiny lady, and she talks like this, just very unassuming, very sweet and low key. And then when I came in, she was like this, like, ah, it was all like that. It was crazy, and I'm not even
Really?
kidding. I mean, the hair on my orange was standing up. I mean, it was like, I didn't know. I mean, and you could feel it coming at you like energy. It wasn't even just like it was. There's no way she faked it. No way, because you could feel it in your bones. It was ridiculous.
Wow.
And it was,
What,
and
when
this was
she came
negative,
back, go ahead, Rick.
negative energy you had. I mean, you could
Oh
feel the
yeah. Oh yeah.
negativity.
Yes.
Now, when she came back, did she recall anything
She
that
had
happened?
no idea. She had no
Wow.
idea. And this went on for a little while because we were all just like, we didn't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then she switched to try to be the personality switched from this like I'm gonna intimidate you and scare you kind of being to kind of like, oh, you're so nice to me. I want to go home with you, and we were like, oh, you ain't coming home with me. So it was trying all of these things to get us to engage with it, or I don't know, to scare us or something. And basically what we ended up doing is saying this is not something I can help with, and you need to talk to somebody who does exorcisms. And
Wow.
I think
Wow.
it probably did follow a couple of us home. So I heard from one of the people who said that they had some engagement with that energy afterwards. And I don't remember if it was that night or the next morning, but I'm in the bathroom showering and the towel falls off the rack. And I'm not talking about like it was haphazardly put on there. It was on there all the way. So you had to pull it for it to come down. And I saw that and I started laughing. I'm like, get out of my house. And I never had any other problems after that. But I think when it's something like that, they're trying to scare you and they're trying to feed off your fear. And we
Mm-hmm.
really weren't giving it that kind of energy. It's just like, I don't know how to deal with you. I can't help you. Just goodbye. That kind of thing.
That's really interesting. It just took me back to a time, and I used to run a yoga studio, and I was really, increasing my own spirituality and whatnot. And a lady said, "Oh, you're getting to that point where the demons are going to come and try to sway your spiritual growth." And I was like looking at her like, "What demons?" So I didn't really
I
have a
get that happen.
belief in demons, but or I don't know that strong of a negative spirit, I guess. So that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's the
Well,
one and only time I've ever had any personal encounters with anything like that.
Yeah.
it's well known in like religious teaching. You go to church, that you have to maintain a spirituality in a positive mode because immediately upon gaining, like whether it's believing in God or whatever your deity is, if you have one, but if you're being attracted to that good energy and you're in a situation where you're and I and I'll just put going to church as an example. You come out of church, you're feeling good, you're feeling energy, you're feeling positive and with a spirit of God. But unless you keep that fire going in you and that positiveness, the devil and demons will try to take that away from you. They will try to invade your space. I truly believe this. So if you don't continuously stoke that flame of goodness and you let that negative come in, you would be open to it or at least recognize it.
Mm.
It makes sense to me. I mean, the yin and the yang, the positive and negative, what goes up must come down. So in a world that's balanced, that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
So what
How
is
did you get
a
in?
uh,
Go ahead.
well, go ahead, Jim.
Oh, I was just going to ask how you started working with the paranormal.
So that was just kind of accident. It wasn't something that I set out to do. I think it's just a natural function from working in trauma because everything
Mhm.
is not related to your childhood. Everything's not related to, a medical emergency or something. We are holistic people, and spirit is part of that, and the unknown is part of that. So it makes total sense to me that things from the other world could be scary. And not to say that necessarily that it's dangerous, but because we don't really give a lot of energy to that in our society, I think a lot of people are scared of it because it's just the unknown.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we had a guest on one of our, like long ago, like one of our first podcasts, probably within the first 30, that was an ET experiencer, and she was using hypnosis therapy to help um, ET experiencers overcome their trauma that they had from their ET experiences, and it's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Have you dealt with or worked with anybody with ET experience?
Absolutely. Yes. And those are tough because a lot of times there is no memory. So you need to know how to work with the body because if you say, well, okay, well, what happened? I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a dead end. So if you can work with the body remembers everything and then you can get it and you can resolve it.
Hmm. Now she was saying that the ETs were taking women, and she had a video on YouTube too that talked about it, that they were using women to impregnate them, letting them start the process of growing a baby, and then taking the child. You know, all while they were out and not having any memory of this happening. But
Yeah.
and like the
Um,
only evidence they'd have it of is like, okay, all of a sudden I didn't have periods for a couple months, and then I did, and it's like I don't know, it's
yeah,
pretty
so this
wild
happens
story.
with men too. And obviously not impregnating the men, but they're taking their sperm so that can be used to impregnate the women. So I think this is well documented in the literature. I do think that this is going on, and you can imagine. I mean, I think it's the same thing as if you were being kidnapped. That would be terrifying because that's exactly what's happening, and you're having these things done to you against your will. That is traumatizing.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. The YouTube video that she was in that talks about all this happening, they were saying, I think it was Eisenhower, that the aliens worked out a deal with Eisenhower to say, okay, we'll share some technology with you if you let us have some people to do these experiments with. Have you heard anything about that?
Yes. So I'm wondering if with the new administration that we have and the disclosure, and we're going to open up the JFK files, we're going to open up the Martin Luther King files, if that's going to be part of the disclosure too. I'm hoping so. If that is true, I think that we need to know about that.
I
Well,
agree. I'm hoping they open the.
When Trump was on Rogan, Rogan asked him about that.
Uh,
Said, you're gonna let loose the UFOs, UFOs real," and he just deferred. He's like,
Oh.
I'm not talking about this, and I really
okay.
can't. But I'll just tell you, there's more to it than's out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's the disclosure hearings that are going on now. I can't remember the guy, Lou Elizondo, and he's talking about all of these things too. So there's definitely more to it than we know about.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I can't remember. Rick, do you remember the name of that scientist I told you to look up the Joe Rogan show on?
I can't. I'm not sure.
Shoot, I wish I remembered
Regarding
his name right
what?
now. My brother had told me about it. He was kind of like interviewed all the people that have ever had like ET experiences, like the pilots, air traffic controllers, everybody that's came out of the military that would be open enough to talk about this, and all the ET experiences and the propulsion systems and how they were
Yeah.
using those, and
Well,
how the government.
Bob Lazar was an Area 51 guy who, and I just re-listened to that podcast recently, or about half
Hmm.
of it because it's 3 hours long. But and he worked at Area 51, and he was for 40, almost 50 years, his story has never changed. He's been very consistent, and
Hmm.
he and there was an element that wasn't stable in our periodic table elements, but in this ET craft that they have in Area 51, it did have that element and it was stable, and that's what allowed all these extra propulsions and anti-gravity stuff or whatever. I'm certainly not an expert on that stuff, but Bob Lazarus might be who you were talking about.
Yeah, it was a different name. I think it was a Steven something, but I don't remember. But it was lit
Stephen
early
Greer?
on, like when he first went to Spotify, they wouldn't let this podcast air. It didn't come out for like, I don't know, over 10 years or 20 years. It's pretty fascinating.
Huh. But who did you say, Laura?
Stephen Greer?
I think
Is
it
that who
might
it
have
was,
been
Jim?
Stephen Greer. That might be it. So you're familiar with him?
Oh, yeah.
What's his deal?
Well, I don't know too much about Stephen Greer, but I know that he is the one who pioneers the CE5 protocol, where you can go out and contact the ETs. So you do this procedure under the dark skies, and then they will show up. Aircraft will show
Yeah.
up.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's a good idea.
Why?
Well, because you don't know who you're calling. I mean, it'd be like, here's the phone, go call somebody. You don't know who's going to be on the other end.
That's
Right.
true. But I do remember in the podcast him talking about that and actually being able to summon
Yes.
ETs with a certain
Yes.
technique he uses.
I've actually had that experience. That was my first ET experience. I was 18, so it's
Oh,
stupid.
no, do
Uh,
share. How did all this
Yeah.
Yeah,
start out?
what? I want to hear this.
So I was reading a book. I had heard about aliens before. I'm not sure why it grabbed me so differently this time, but I was reading this book, read it cover to cover in one sitting, and it just hit me that ETs are real
Mm-hmm.
and that they're here and they contact us. And I was so excited that I said, ETs, if you're out there, come and see me. And I was just passionate about it and went to bed, and I woke up in the middle of the night and they're in my room. I
Whoa.
was terrified. I was not ready or expecting. And there were, I don't know, 5 or 6 of them at the foot of my bed. And it's was not, there was something surrealistic about it. Everything didn't look quite normal.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no ambient light in the room. That's one of the tells for me, is that there's no ambient light. So is that a screen memory? Is that a projection? I don't know. But they're in my room. They shouldn't be visible because there's no light in there, but I could still
Mm-hmm.
see them. And they didn't speak. I'm totally frozen. I don't know if I could even move my eyes, but I could think. And I'm screaming at them, "Who are you? What do you want? Leave me alone." And they never said anything back, but as soon as I said, "Leave me alone," poof, they were gone. And I could
Whoa.
feel myself thawing out from my head first. And I just was like, "Oh God, it's taking forever to get to my feet. I got to get up." And I got up and I turned all the lights on and I just could not breathe. It was terrifying. So do I
Wow.
think you can summon them? I do. And I don't think you should, because you don't know what you're summoning.
Sure. What do they look like?
So this is strange. I've never heard this description ever in any kind of ET lore. But they looked like creatures with KKK hoods on, or like Oogie Boogie from Nightmare Before Christmas. They looked like they had some sort of cloak. So it looked like they were wearing a garment. I didn't see faces. I didn't see limbs. It was just a kind of like a hooded thing, and they were white. And at that time, they didn't have Oogie Boogie yet. So the only thing I could say that they looked like was KKK, but it was more like Oogie Boogie than a KKK person.
Hmm.
And what kind of energy was in the room at this time? Were you just scared, terrified? Was it welcoming? What did it?
There was nothing threatening about it at all. It was very neutral. It wasn't loving presence either. They were just real neutral. It was just like, boom, I'm here. You called.
Huh.
That is pretty fascinating. Do you think there's like you said they didn't speak, but do you feel
Mm-mm.
like there was any transmission?
Oh, I felt like they could understand me.
Okay.
Absolutely. I but they didn't offer any communication to me.
Okay. All right.
But you summoned them.
I did. I
Would you
did.
do would you do it again?
Have you
I
done?
would
Yeah.
not. And so kids these days, they grew up with Harry Potter and magical things, lots of things like Harry Potter, and they believe, and they go out, they hear about the Wendigos or what's the skinwalkers, and they hear about you can summon these things. I've talked to kids who's like, "Oh, I need to go summon them," and they try or they do. And I think that's really, really dangerous, because what are you going to do when it shows up?
And you mentioned
You're not.
skinwalkers and what was the other one?
Wendigos.
Wendigos. This is beyond me. I've never heard of this
Are those
story.
Harry Potter characters or something?
No, those are Native American lore. That comes from Native American lore. Or the Thin Man. Yeah. So those are creatures that are native to this country.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Can you tell us more about them? I've never heard
Well,
of
I
them.
don't really know a whole lot. I
Okay.
know so there's a TV show about Skinwalker Ranch where lots of bizarre things happen there, and there may be a portal to another dimension. Certainly, the Skinwalkers are that's why they call it Skinwalker Ranch, and they're these creatures that devour uh livestock and are threatening to people at times. In Native American lore, there you don't want to run across a skinwalker. There's a lot of Native American lore about skinwalkers in that area, and I've been in that area in the Uinta Mountains, and it's different. Let me put it that way. So one of the things that I do is spiritual travel, and I take people to places all over the world that have spiritual significance. Now, I'm not talking about cathedrals. I'm talking about pre-Christian typically. And often they're on the ley lines or they're on vortexes. So the energy there is different. And I think it's probably a portal. And I would guess that they are creatures that are interdimensional. So they slip in and they slip out. Because sometimes with these creatures, they don't leave any evidence other than, I killed a sheep.
Yeah.
I think fairies are the same thing. I think they're interdimensional creatures and they wink in and they wink out. I think Bigfoot's the same thing.
Huh. So where are you taking people on these spiritual journeys? Is that what you
Well, it
called it? A
could be
spiritual
places like
journey?
Stonehenge, is a famous one. Machu Picchu is famous, but typically we go to ones that aren't that big and overrun with tourists, but they're on ley lines and they have really lots of powerful energies. And I didn't know this at the time, but I think the evidence is that they are vortexes. They have different, they resonate differently and they make you feel different. And some of them are positive and some of them are negative. But we often do rituals or just do meditations at these sites, and you can feel the energy. It's
Mhm.
really different, really different. And when it's powerful and uplifting, it's amazing. But they're not always that. Sometimes they're negative, and it's just like, oh, I can't wait to get out of here.
Yeah,
I was
it is.
watching a episode of I think it was Ancient Aliens or something like that just recently, and they were talking about Mount Shasta in California,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
and they were showing, and I had never known this, but well, like you said, these energy spots throughout the
Yeah.
earth, and and I guess there's many of them, like Machu
Yes.
Picchu, and they're all connected,
Yeah.
and they were making the correlation like these energy centers, of which you mentioned among others, are like the chakras of the earth.
Yes. Yes.
And depend on where you are, you're going to get different energies and interdimensional travel. And this guy swore that he's actually seen people appear and disappear through the rock in caves at Mount Shasta.
Mm.
And it's kind of hard. It's kind of a hard sell, especially if you're a skeptic on this kind of stuff. But the more you learn about it, I'm starting to believe more in interdimensional beings. And I thought that was really interesting because I had never thought about it as these energy centers being like the chakras of the planet, and how
Hmm.
those different energies in different places would affect you. And like you said, some are positive, some are negative.
I think if you go to Mount Shasta, I take it with a grain of salt until I've been there. But if you go to Mount Shasta, it's different. It's really different. And I don't think so. Mount Shasta is a little tiny town, and you have to go up the mountain. It's up, 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 up. It's a long way, and it gets real cold as you're going up. So it's not something that you're going to just do on a whim. Take some planning, take some time, and it takes some energy to get up there. And the energy changes the closer you get to the top. It's
Really.
freaky. It's really freaky.
Mm. There's
Eh,
a yoga retreat center that I used to work at. It's where I met my wife, and there's this one area outside the lodge. There actually used to be a building on this land, um, with like a place where they stored a fire engine and all this, but it burnt down, ironically, with a fire engine in it. But on that flat area where this building used to be, we used to do our yoga there, and we did it there because you could feel the energy when you lay down your mat and just sit on it. You could just feel the vibration coming up through you while you're sitting on that land. And it's just fascinating. How do you feel that vibration? I've never felt it before anywhere, but just feeling that vibration raise up through you from the land, it's like, whoa. I mean, there's no doubt about it. You feel it. And anybody that have taken there, that have sat down in that spot, feels it too. That's
Yeah.
where I ended
Well, I
up
think it's a small,
proposing to my wife on that spot, because I thought this is this has to happen here.
well, I think Mount Shasta is a small town because people aren't meant to live there on sacred spaces like that. I think it's too powerful. So the town is right at the base of it. So I don't mean necessarily there, but a lot of places like Chaco Canyon, I think you're just meant to come there, do your rituals, connect with spirit or whatever that energy is, and leave. I don't know about the long-term effects of staying in that energy, but it is good.
Yeah. It almost makes me wonder if that's why the building burnt down. Like it
I
wasn't
think
supposed to
so.
be on top of that
Yeah.
energy, you know?
Yeah.
With the fire truck in it.
Right. Yeah, pretty crazy. This is really
So
fascinating and interesting. I love this topic because there's so much that I'm learning as we get into these things. But I wanted to ask you something I saw on your profile. You mentioned that you have a animist spiritual background. Can you share with us what that means?
sure. So a lot of people are not familiar with the word, but if I say, that's the Native American traditional spirituality, that's a way that lots of people can connect to it. And what that means is it's just traditional to indigenous people, tribal people, even today. Before there was organized religion, there was animism. And it's
Okay.
just really the belief that everything is alive, sacred, and connected, which is where we're going scientifically anyway. So I think if,
Avatar.
if you get out of the organized hierarchies and just get down and connect with nature and each
Hmm.
other, this is where you end up.
Yeah, that totally makes sense to me. I've been trying to do actually I mentioned that hypnotherapist earlier. Trying to do some past life regression because when I was a teen, someone gave me a pair of moccasins and I went walking in the woods and I felt so connected to this, like I never even think I thought about past lives before this. But as I'm walking through these trails, I'm feeling like, oh my gosh, there is something here. Like I was an Indian and I tracked and I hunted and I ran around in moccasins on trails before. This just felt so normal. And then I read the book Black Elk Speaks,
Yeah.
probably from just a powerful, amazing book. And I just felt so much connection to that book and the story. And then when I went to the Black Hills, I was like, whoa, I've been here. I know I've
Yeah.
been here. It's just incredible.
Yeah. I don't know if you knew this, but past life regression was the first thing that I ever did professionally. So I've been
I
doing
did
that for
not
a
know
long
that.
time. Yeah, yeah. And I think that
Wow.
that just like you said, you can connect with a place or a thing and all of a sudden the knowing comes back to you. And so I think you probably were Native American. You probably did walk the land like that before because your DNA knows, it remembers.
Hmm. Yeah, it was interesting when I did the past life regression hypnotherapist. I was totally relaxed. I was there and walking down a hall, and it was time to open the door to go to my past life. And the door opens, and I just could not pass through the door. I was just
Uh,
stuck there. So I don't know what that was all about, but
my
I'd
guess
love
is
to
that
try again.
something either really good happened and it breaks your heart to not have that anymore, or something really terrifying happened, or maybe not terrifying, but traumatizing.
Hmm.
And it's just too painful to revisit it. But
Yeah,
that's the reason to do it.
right. Yeah, get through
Yeah.
those old hurts.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to try again at some point. So I want to get through that door. Show me.
So you mentioned at the beginning that you also deal with religious trauma.
Yes.
What I'm not sure even what that would be.
Well, a lot of times trauma is about not having any control. And there are religions that are more controlling than others. So we've all heard of Catholic guilt. We've heard of Jewish guilt. I don't think there's an Islamic guilt, but there's a lot of control in Islam. Like there are things that you can and cannot do. And when you are controlled to that extent, you can't talk to the infidels, you can't talk to non-believers. it damages us in a way that we don't develop normally, because everything is threatening our soul. You know, if I do this, I'm going to go to hell. If I'm going to do that, I'm going to be ostracized. And we don't think of that as traumatizing, but it is. So when I'm talking about trauma, I'm not talking about somebody stabbed me, somebody shot me, somebody raped me. Those things can create trauma, but really what creates trauma is emotional overwhelm and the lack of control to do anything about it. So it's not what happens to you, it's what you think about what happens to you and what you can do about what happens to you. And in religious trauma syndrome, I can't stop God from sending me to hell. You know, even if I get out of it, I may still be so afraid of going to hell because I've gone against everything that I believe in. I've gone against my community, that it just follows me everywhere I go.
So people have an issue with like knowing they're going to go to hell no matter what. Is
It's
that what you mean by
really,
that?
it's not the idea of going to hell. It's the idea of my identity is threatened. When you're a Catholic, you are a Catholic. You don't get to leave. And so all that stuff that you learn is indoctrinated into your identity. And identity is very difficult to shift. It's not like saying, so I have depression is different than saying I am depressed. If I have depression, I can set that down. If I am depressed, I can't set it down without losing a part of me. So if I am Catholic, then all the stuff that goes along with that comes with me. Now, I'm not saying that it's bad to be Catholic or Jewish or Islamic. I think it depends on how it is presented to you, because there's many flavors of everything. But in a lot of fundamentalist faiths, I mean, it could be Baptist. It's, you know, it doesn't have to be one of those. But if it's fire and brimstone and you're always under threat, then it would be the same as if you're always under threat of being beaten. You just don't have any sovereignty.
That makes total sense. That's one of the reasons I'm not really big on most religions. Yeah, I think there's some good in a lot of them, but
Sure.
so many of them are just there to keep people down, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I don't know if I buy that.
What do you mean?
I mean, I think, well, first of all, I'm not a big fan of the Catholic Church per se. Jim and I, just so you know, Laura, we're cousins and we grew up together. And our grandma would haul us out to Catholic Church, you know, whenever she could. And but I was never a big player in the Catholic religion, even when I was a kid. I never the whole Latin-y thing and stuff like that. Although I always did believe, you know, in God. Uh, but then when I used to go to church with my Aunt Irma, you remember her, Jim? I don't know
I
if you
do.
do.
Yep.
She would take us to a Baptist church in Lincoln Park, but it was much less strict and much more open and inviting. Uh, and that was a real positive influence on me, where the Catholic Church was kind of negative. So I suppose you could get trapped in these type of organized religions that have some negative connotations, but I think it's up to each one of us to kind of just say, hey, this isn't for me, and to kind of search out that higher power that is going to give you a good energy and not be negative in your life.
I think there is an oppression, though. I mean, when you're told that, God is going to judge you and that if you don't do this or you don't do
God
that,
is going to judge you.
well, I don't necessarily buy into that. My beliefs on heaven and hell are states of mind. They're not physical places up there in the cloud somewhere that God's going to send you because you did this wrong or you were bad. To me, it's more like, okay, if you're sinning, if you're doing whatever, it's affecting your state of mind here and now. Hell is your reality that you're manifesting and putting yourself in, just like heaven is your reality that you're manifesting and putting yourself in based on your actions, your karma, and it's being the threat of I do something wrong today and God's going to send me to hell. I just don't buy
No,
into
I
that.
don't think that that's the teachings of God. I think that if you sin today and you repent and ask for forgiveness, you are forgiven, and you won't go to hell for that reason as long as you ask for forgiveness.
Did you know you're going to get in the middle of a religious debate, Laura? So you could be a total shithead your whole life, and at the last minute say, I repent and I trust and I believe in you and I'm saved.
If you're sincere
Okay.
and yeah, I do believe
So
that.
that's a scapegoat. So I could be a shitbag for the rest of my life, and at the last minute, if I'm
Well,
sincere, I'm
I
going to
don't think you
heaven.
can go into that with a plan to make that work. I mean, no one's going to come into I'm going to live my whole life as a criminal and abuse people and do wrong and sin in the eyes of God, and then oh yeah, and at the last minute, because you never know when that last minute is, Jim. My last minute might be in 20 minutes after this podcast's over.
Yeah.
So how can you make that plan? So I think that's a little hyperbolic.
Okay. And I respect where you're at.
Your thoughts there, Laura? What do you think about that?
Well, used to work in a prison, and there were lots of bad people in there who found God.
In prison.
And, I think people do that.
Yeah.
When you don't have anything left and you're desperate, but once you let them out again, they're the same people. So I don't know what God's going to do in the last minute, but I don't know that it changes people.
I mean, I hadn't planned on having this conversation either, but you said that I made a note, religious trauma. So I just wanted to
Yeah.
expound on that. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
but,
No, I think trauma can happen from anything, rape trauma, religious trauma, ET trauma. For me, it's not about the how it happens. It's about how it's impacting your nervous system and in your impact, how you're moving in the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And your underlying beliefs.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That totally makes sense. So how do you work with people to get over these traumas?
So typically it's the same thing. So we're working with the nervous system to get it out of fight and flight. But
Mm-hmm.
sometimes there are some nuances depending upon how the trauma happened, like religious trauma syndrome. There are differences than paranormal PTSD, because quite often with paranormal PTSD, there's no enemy that you can see. So
Okay.
you have to deal with the nuances as well. But really, it's about getting the nervous system to bounce back in a healthy way so that you have some flexibility and you feel more in control of your life and you feel like you like yourself. Because a lot of times, what happens with this trauma thing is that you don't like yourself. I'm ashamed that this happened. If people knew that this happened to me, they're going to judge me. I'm going to be so horrible and I'm going to be an outcast. It's that kind of stuff that goes on. So we have to heal that as well.
And is that done through like self-forgiveness, or are you using
Uh,
meditation? What is?
I don't know how to explain this really. It is, but the things that hold the beliefs together and holds that energy together is kind of less tangible than that. So you have your right brain and your left brain. The left brain's a logical thing, and if self-help worked, then the left brain would be great. Everybody could read a book and heal themselves, but that's really not how it works. You have to get into the energy of it, the how that energy is held in your body, and release it in that way. And once it's gone, it's gone. And you're not going to get there by talking about it.
Okay.
hmm. Can you say that again?
Sure.
I was kind of getting it, then it kind of flew over my head a little bit.
So when something happens to us that's traumatizing, there's the thing that happens, and then there's the thought about it, that the thought behind it is really what creates the trauma, because everybody can go through horrible stuff and bounce back. If you have support, if you are seen, if you are comforted, those kinds of things. But once I'm by myself or I feel alone with something, like that ET comes into my room and I feel alone, oh God, I can't say this to anybody. They're going to think I'm totally nuts. So now I'm isolated, even if I'm not. And so I'm holding this burden all by myself. I feel powerless. It's an ET. What am I going to do? I don't have no power over an ET. He can just show up whenever he wants to. I can't lock the door. I can't get a gun. It's not going to help. So this kind of thing is what I mean by powerlessness. So the way around that, it still might be happening, but I have to get my nervous system out of that fight or flight. And I have to change my thoughts around it so that I'm still a good person and that I have some choices. I can accept it if nothing else. And once I can do that, then the trauma goes away. It's kind of like when Viktor Frankl was talking about Auschwitz, being in Auschwitz, and he looked at why some people survived and why some people died. And what he found is it was hope. The people who said, okay, I can do anything until Christmas. If I get back past Christmas, then it is going to be okay. Christmas comes and goes, and they're still here. They give up hope, and they're the ones that die. Whether it's to disease or they get, killed some other way, they just lose hope. So it's kind of the same thing.
Just having a mental fortitude to push through,
Yes.
basically.
Yeah, and it is that. I hate to say that because it makes the people who are suffering seem weak. Well, I just don't have the mental fortitude. It's not something that you can just switch on and off. It's not really a choice because your body's working against you. You do need help with it, but it is that.
Well, and everybody has their own point where they're going to topple over the edge.
Yeah.
It's going to be different for me, for you, for anyone else. I think we all like to think that, that we'd be the hero if we had the chance.
Right.
I just the other day I watched the Patton movie with George C. Scott again, just because I wanted to watch it. And I often wonder, if I was in a situation of a war or where I had to risk my life to help somebody, I like to think that I would be that guy.
Mm-hmm.
And some part of me knows I would be, but you never really know until
You don't
you're
know.
in that situation.
Yeah.
Where I think I would be more that person where I could attack that and go after that in more of an acute setting, but in a chronic setting like Auschwitz, for example.
Yeah.
I don't know how I would handle myself in that situation. Because I suppose that is different. You see someone get hit or a car wreck in a burning car, boom, that's an acute setting. You're going to go and hopefully save that person or do what you can to do it. But something long term, like being in prison or in a, in World War II concentration camp, I don't know about that.
Right.
I bet a lot of people would just end it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, those are definitely tough situations, but really a testament to the power of our minds. We can hold that hope and make it through. And if you don't have that power to control your mind, it's kind of a handicap for you. But I want to go back to where you talked about getting people out of that fight or flight mode. What tools or techniques are you using to do that?
So some of the newer ones that are coming out are somatic therapy, which means that you stay in your body because we dissociate.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to feel that ugly stuff, but when you stay in your body with it in a calm state, then it gives it the space to leave. And that's really what needs to happen. So we have to lean into this discomfort in order to let it go. And that's kind of counterintuitive. Eye movements like EMDR is another way. So what we're learning in trauma therapy is that there are ways for the body to work with us. If you look at wild animals, they don't have trauma. They don't have PTSD because it's naturally built in us to be able to discharge it. But with people, we are socialized out of doing those things. So people, farm animals, laboratory animals, pets, we get PTSD because we're socialized to just kind of sit there and take it, basically. So some of the somatic things is you can teach your body how to release it as you go, like wild animals do. That's really effective too. So one of those techniques is called trauma release exercises. Very effective. I think all military should learn how to do that, and all first responders, so that they can, I think all people need to, but especially people who are in it all the time. So you can just train your body how to let it go at the end of the day so it doesn't accumulate. Those are the big ones, but there's lots of effective techniques now where you didn't have that, say, 30, 40 years ago.
You said EMDR?
EMDR, yeah.
What is that?
So EMDR works with eye movements. And when we are walking, for example, our eyes are scanning right to left. It's very small. It's imperceptible. We don't know that we're doing it, but our eyes are scanning right to left as we're walking, and it's giving us a sense of time passing. So I know that this is the past, this is the future, this is the now. It gives us perspective. In trauma, the memory freezes in time. So if it happened when I was 6 years old, every time I'm triggered, I'm that 6 year old again. So you're just like, wow, you're a grown woman. Why don't you just act like it? Because I'm not there. I'm 6 years old. I'm terrified. So when you're doing the eye movements, it makes your eyes go back and forth like you're walking, and your brain is processing it as, oh, this is happening, and now it's over. So when I get to the point where it's over, it's now in the past. It's not in my body. It's not in the present moment, and I'm not reacting to it anymore.
Yeah. I find it fascinating how the body can hold on to things. Being a yoga teacher, a lot of times when we'd go into deep quadricep stretches, hip stretches, I would share with people, it's okay if you get emotional at this point. Our quads often hold things
Yeah,
that when we stretch the muscle, the emotion releases.
that's right.
And I was just talking to a guy about a week ago. I don't remember who it was, and we were talking about that. He says, "Man, I came out of this deep stretch and I was just bawling. I couldn't control the tears." He goes, "This is like a faucet." He goes, "I don't know where the sadness point was, like where the memory of the sadness came from." He goes, "But that sadness was just stored in there. When I released
Mhm.
the muscle, bam, it just hit him like a flood."
Yeah. Well, trauma release exercises is the same. So
Hmm.
you're hitting those muscles that kind of hold that all in. And as you're relaxing and releasing, whatever's in there is going to come out. And you typically you don't know where it came from. It's not like you get, oh gosh, when I was 10 years old, I pulled out the chair from somebody and I feel so guilty about it. It's not that. Or, oh, remember when that
Yeah.
boy hit me in the face? It's typically not that. It's just your body's doing what it's doing. You have no idea. And all you need to do is just sit there and allow it to happen.
Yeah. That's
So
great work that you're doing. I love this
Mm,
conversation.
so EMDR, I'm guessing the EM stands for eye movement.
yes.
What does the DR stand for?
Deprocessing. I can't remember. EM, eye movement. I don't remember. Sorry.
So, but basically, since you said so, the theory behind it is when you're walking, you're doing this scanning. When you have a trauma and you get back to when you're 6 years old and this happened, and that's when you can't get out of it. So you take this eye movement therapy, and am I on the right path here? And you actually being that is a movement in time, or am I on the right path here? You can move past that by
Yes.
doing this eye movement therapy while you're in
Yes.
that state of trauma.
Well, you're triggered. Yes. So it's a timeline and it's a physiological thing. So there's other forms of timeline therapy, but you find the place where it started. Now you might think, let's say my husband yelled at me this morning. I was like, oh, and you think, oh, that's what I'm upset about. But then you go into your body says, no, this is not where this began. This began when you were 13 years old and blah, blah, blah happened. You want to find that moment because that's the seed of it. So to get rid of the weed, you have to hit the seed. So you need your body because your mind's not going to know. And then once you get the seed and you process that, then every moment that came after that can also release too. So typically what we do in therapy is we'll say, "Oh, my husband yelled at me and this is what I'm upset about." And then you deal with that, the root's still there. So you go home today, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, and you're doing the same thing over again because the seed's still there. So hopefully in whatever trauma therapy you're doing, your helper is working with the seed, not the symptom.
Okay. Well, that would seem to be real important. I mean, you can treat symptoms all day, like our medical
Right.
community does every day, and
Yeah.
never ever uh, get to the root cause of these issues.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to be something you have no idea about almost always.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah, these things start when we're really, really young. Because you think about it, when you're little, you can't talk, you can't walk, you can't do anything for yourself. You're absolutely powerless. You depend on your parents for everything, and you can't communicate your needs. So, and you don't have the brain development to know really what's going on in this strange world. So, and you're a little narcissist, everything's about you. So, if
Right.
somebody doesn't feed you on time, you could be thinking, well, I'm such a rotten person, nobody loves me. You're not going to remember that when you're 25 or 50.
True.
But it could be something as simple as that. You know, I just didn't get the attention that I needed when I was an infant.
Wow. Well, how do you bring that? How do you have someone recognize that?
The body knows. The body always knows. It's kind of freaky when you go into a session and you think it's about something superficial. And then you're talking to your helper and they're saying, okay, where are you now? And it's like, I feel kind of crazy saying this, but I feel like I'm in my crib. I'm pre-verbal. I don't even have words yet, but that happens all the time.
Hmm.
And it's often something about I was crying, I couldn't reach the puppy, it's stuff like that. It's not to say that, getting cigarettes put out on you is not a big thing, but quite often it's stuff that happens when you were little. I really wanted that thing and you gave it to my sister. Those things are heartbreaking and you carry them if you're not able to express them. And then they turn into other things.
So things that we might look at as trivial now as adults
Yes.
could really have an impact. Well, yeah, and
Yeah. Yeah. So
Rick,
not
I'm
being able
guessing.
to find somebody to love, not being able to get the job that you want, not being able to succeed in however you want could have the roots in something as small as I wasn't picked for the sports team in elementary school. So
really.
therefore now my thinking becomes nobody wants me. I'm going to fail or whatever. There's always a thought like that that's at the root of it all. And then everything we manifest afterwards is a function of that belief.
But then how
So
do
it's
you counteract that, sometimes you have I'm not sure the right word, but like strong fathers say, hey, man up, quit being such a wussy, uh, that kind of thing. Or is that does that help or hurt in this traumatic relationship?
It depends. So, as you were saying, everybody's different and we're all resilient in different ways. So, for some people, that could be very helpful. For other people, it could be really traumatizing. But I
Because
think in
that's how I
all,
look at myself and what I tell myself when I don't want to do something. I'm like, hey,
Mhm.
man up, quit being such a wuss, get out there. I call it my inner bitch. I just gotta smack my inner bitch and get up and do what I need to do. And I when I tell but I don't think I would put that on someone else. Like
Mhm.
on my daughter, for example. I would never talk to her that way. I'm more nurturing with her, although she's very successful and on our way to her master's next month in nursing, so that's cool. But I was always supportive in that realm. But then sometimes she'll come back at me and say, "Dad, you remember when this happened back then?" And I realize that I did things not just situations that occurred that I could have handled better that are now causing that in her.
Yeah.
Hopefully not major, but she brings them up to me from time to time, and I feel some guilt about that.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that I always tell parents is that you're going to mess up your kids and your parents messed you up. And it's not intentional typically, now it's yours to clean up. So, I mean, I tell my daughter all the time, I'm sorry. You just have to be kind of accepting of that. We are who we are and we're not perfect and you're going to make mistakes and then you do better tomorrow, hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it sounds like that nobody's free of this. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
everybody's got some level of trauma or, things from their past that are going to bother them through their lifetime.
And I think that's okay because everybody needs an obstacle. If we had no obstacles, there would be no ambition and we would never do anything. There'd be no need to get a nursing degree. There would be no inspiration for falling in love. So I don't think it has to be a horrible thing.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm just thinking like on some level, everybody needs a little bit of work like this,
Oh yeah.
and it
Yeah,
would make you a better person overall, right?
absolutely.
That's why I tell Jim I love doing the podcast so much is because it's my like 1 hour of therapy a couple times a week. Whether it's with you or someone, a hypnotherapist or a holistic healer or whatever, it doesn't matter. Just and really, I think talking about just these subjects with you where I might not feel exact parallel to what you're saying, I can always find some kind of thing in my own life where what you're saying is gonna be a parallel. Be I'll have an example of that I can think of, and that happens every time I talk to someone, another guest on the podcast, and
Yeah.
I think just kind of talking it through with a loved one or a spouse or a boyfriend, girlfriend, brother, sister, trusted friend. Yeah, I have a hard time doing that,
Mm.
but the conversations like this make me more open to pursue those conversations, and it certainly uh, helped me as a person. And yeah, know what I mean. Where I would never have that kick in the butt, to, but just meeting
Absolutely.
someone like you who's saying, "Hey, you have to do this stuff."
Yeah. So I have a podcast too, and it's the thing that I love about it. It's meeting these people that you might not ever talk to otherwise, and they have such different ways of viewing the world, but yet we all connect on some level of humanity, and it expands me. So I really appreciate talking to different people.
What's the name of your podcast?
It is Fantasia.
Just Fantasia, or it is Fantasia?
Fantasia, yeah.
Fantasia. Nice. I'm gonna have to check that out.
And that's on Apple and Spotify, stuff like
Yeah.
that, or
Yeah.
You put them on YouTube as well?
Yep.
Okay, great. Definitely want to check that out. Yeah, I never thought, like, when we got into podcasting, that there would be so much self-growth. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just, it's transforming. And I mean, who would have known, It's just
Yeah. I love
kind of
especially
incredible.
talking to people that I don't agree with. I'm like, okay, teach me something.
Mm-hmm.
And I
yeah.
still find out, well, you know what? You got a point. I might not still agree with you on the big stuff, but they always teach me something.
Yeah. Yeah. Or even just, to get an idea of where they're coming from, their perspective, even if you don't agree, it's like, that's really interesting way of looking at something. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. So if do you do remote work with people with the PTSD, the
I
trauma relief?
do. Yeah. So before COVID,
Mm-hmm.
not so much because we had this idea that it had to be face to face. And now we're learning that it is better face to face, I think. The energy is just different, but it doesn't have to be effective.
Yeah. And if one of our listeners today says, "Oh man, I really resonate with what Laura's saying. I'd love to do a session with her." Do you have a
Then they
website that they
could
go to?
find me at lauragiles.net, which is my name. So super easy.
That is easy.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I'm definitely going to check out your podcast.
Cool.
I'll leave you a comment from the BeachMan.
Awesome.
How long have you been podcasting?
Ooh, I'm not real sure when I started podcasting. Probably 2018.
Oh, really? So you've been
Yeah.
at it a while.
Wow.
Yeah.
How many episodes have you put out?
Well, so this one is a newer podcast. This was probably maybe only 6 months, but I started with an animist podcast in 2018.
Back to that word,
Yeah.
animist. Yeah. Remind me, it means like a connection in nature. Is that
It means that everything is alive, connected, and sacred.
got it? Yeah. I love that word,
Yeah.
animist. And it's a North American term?
It is.
North
So the
American
term
Indian?
came about from an anthropologist
Okay.
looking at indigenous spirituality, and there was no name for it because
So this is
But yeah,
fascinating, Laura.
I like that notion of animus, and because I'm beginning to realize how everything is more interconnected than I ever have before, whether physically or spiritually or mentally or energetically.
Mhm.
And it's been kind of, well, like you said, like Jim said, it's kind of been self-growth.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
Learning how all these things are connected.
Yeah. So I want to ask another question about the ET experiences. Have you met other
sure,
people that you've worked with ET?
lots,
Lots.
lots.
Can you share a little bit more about some of those
So
experiences
sometimes
that
it's
other people have had?
yeah, lots. Some personally, some professionally, but it's typically like you were saying, with the woman who had having her eggs harvested.
Uh-huh.
There are lots of reproductive abductees. Um, and there's a lot of people who don't know. They just know something's weird and then it kind of goes blank. Those are the two most common that I see.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't try to recover anybody's memories. If your system is saying, I don't want to remember that, you don't have to remember, but your body knows, so we could still get at it. And you may never know what happened.
I just find it fascinating. And it's like the woman that I talked about before that we had on our podcast. She had no memory of any of this until she went under hypnosis, and then it all
Mm,
came back to her.
mhm.
So,
Yeah, usually there's some sort of clues. Um, so there's different types of ETs. You know, if praying mantises freak you out, you may have had a praying mantis type of experience. Or if it's Halloween and you see the typical big-eyed
mm-hmm.
ET mask and it freaks you out, you may have an experience with one of the grays. So they're not all the same for sure.
Yeah.
It, anything can trigger it. It could be a dream, it could be a movie, anything.
So that begs the question: does the KKK freak you out?
No. It
Okay.
was it was different enough from that I knew that it wasn't KKK. But that's the only way I have of describing it.
Yeah, almost like hoods with eyes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That's wild.
that is wild. Yeah, I don't know. It's just making me want to call in ETs just to have the experience. And
Good
that
luck
might
with
be risk, right?
that. You can make it happen. You can make it happen.
I kind of think I'm going to try. Yeah, because I don't know. I've always been about experiences, and it's one thing to talk about things, believe in things, but until you actually experience it, then you
Yeah.
really have the knowing. So,
There are lots of CE5 groups. You might want to check one of those out. And so you could be in company and be with people who have done it
mhm.
successfully. Or you could just wing it and see what happens.
Do you know? Have you ever participated in one of these CE5 groups?
I have. So I've done it maybe 3 times.
Okay.
I have this thing where wherever I am, the ghost or the ETs don't show up. I don't know what that is about. There is a haunted house near me, and
Okay.
it's very active, very active. I have a lot of friends who are in paranormal research, and they
Hmm.
go there and they get stuff every single time they go.
Mm.
I'm there. So there's three different locations that are pretty close, but not that close. If I'm in one of them, that's the dead one. And as
Mm.
soon as I go, you hear and you're like, oh, they got some activity over there. I run over there, it's gone every single time. Every single time. It's the same thing with CE5. There's groups that are really, really active. They always get stuff. I go there, it's a dud. So whenever that starts happening, I leave. And then as soon as I leave, it happens. I don't know what that is. That's my experience.
Something with your energy.
I
S-
guess it
So
looks
in
like it.
Yeah. So in these CE5 groups, because I know the guy you mentioned before that we were talking about, um, is there a certain meditation or state of mind or
Yeah.
energy state that they're getting into is what I felt was happening? Can you
Yeah, there's a
share?
whole protocol and it does involve some meditation ahead of time to kind of prep
Uh-huh.
the area, I guess.
Can you share what that protocol is like? Are you allowed to do that?
I would if I don't know it well enough.
Okay.
Yeah. It's online though. You could easily find it.
All right. I'm going to do some research. I'd love to have one of those CE5
You should.
facilitators on
You
our show.
should. There's
Yeah.
a famous person, I can't remember, but she has a video of her CE5 experience. Demi Novato, maybe?
And what do you mean by
Really?
a video of her experience?
She just says that, I tried CE5, this is what happened, and she goes into the story of it. So lots of people have done it.
Really?
Yeah, sure.
This video's on YouTube?
Oh yeah, lots.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going down another rabbit hole. I love it.
There you go.
Well, hey, this has really been a fascinating conversation. I love it. I love having you on our show and being a guest. Appreciate you taking the time to be with us today.
Been a pleasure.
Yeah. Any final thoughts?
Just have fun. If you decide to do that, have some fun. If you want to do some trauma work, keep it light, have fun. I mean, it's not necessarily that way, but it could be. So have fun.
I like that advice.
And check you out on the Fantasia podcast.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I'll be
Yeah.
definitely doing that.
Yeah. I think I'm going to do that as soon as we're done here. So. Well, thanks again. Many blessings to you and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
So if you just listen to this podcast and you appreciate the content and the work that we're doing, we would love your support. Look in the comment section of this episode. Subscribe, rate us, comment. This gets our podcast in front of other listeners. And if you noticed, we don't have advertisers. For the cost of a cup of coffee, you can help keep it this way. Become a supporter right now. We'd appreciate it. I'm Jim the Yogi.
I'm Rick the BeachMan.
Peace.